Before we begin today's video, I'd like to give a shout out to a couple of our newest subscribers. Gwyn Pollard, Sebi Stan, and Ramsey's Twisted Yarns. Thank you all for subscribing and welcome to the family. And now on with today's video. Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Drahon, and welcome back to Pathfinder Hero Frame, where we take a look at the different ancestries within Pathfinder 2nd Edition and see what the lore says about that ancestry so that we can create a basic character using the backgrounds and classes. At least try to find some that best fit that ancestry. This series looks at taking on the human fighter approach, the most basic of character creations. We're going to try to find each one of these ancestries' human fighter build. And today we are looking at the Pnoll. Now, you're probably going through the archives of Nethys screaming, "Drahon, this ancestry does not exist!" And to that I say, it does exist. One of the directors of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Logan B., actually created this ancestry. Sort of like how Keith Baker created his own series of Eberron books outside of Eberron Rising from the Last War, and how Matthew Mercer created the Blood Hunter class. I like to call this a second party material. Some people would call it... what's that term people are using these days? Soft canon? Anyway, that is what the Pnoll is. A soft core. A second-party material created by one of the creative directors. And Logan B. actually did a pretty good job on the Pnoll. It has some cultural diversity that wasn't there with other ancestries, or at least not from the ones I have seen so far. The Pnoll is what I would like to call the Bayou Hill-Billies ancestry. And they are a little crazy, but it is one of those things that I felt was needed. Not something you would come up with right off the gate as something that's missing, but once you see the Pnoll, you realize that it was missing there from the selection all along. Now, the Pnoll, like I said, they have the stereotypical Bayou Hillbilly stereotype going on. And while other ancestries would call them possum folk, they don't like being called that. They prefer the Pnoll. And that's pretty much how their culture goes. It needs to be short, sweet, and to the point. Get to the end of your conversation as fast as possible. All the Pnolls have short names, not too many syllables. And, as an example, they use the term Sam when they are addressing an individual or a group of individuals whose names they do not know as of yet. They use it kind of like how we use the term buddy, or pal, or mate. Short, sweet, to the point. We don't know who you are, but I am going to be addressing you. Pal. Now, while the Pnoll themselves are technically possum folk, I would like to classify them as marsupial folk. And as we go into the heritages, I will also be reflavoring them a little bit, just to show you what you could do for this ancestry. For example, we have the heritages: Perfume Pnoll, Pouchful Pnoll, Trash Tooth Pnoll, which you could reflavor as a Tasmanian Devil character. Since the Tasmanian Devil are somewhat carnivorous, they go after carrion a lot of the time. Then you have the Snake-Bitten Pnoll, which you could reflavor as a koala, since they are marsupials who eat one of the most toxic plants, for no real reason other than that is the only food source they want to eat. But Snake-Bitten Pnoll's abilities go hand in hand with a koala, so it works. You may not have gotten bitten by anything venomous, but you do eat a very toxic plant. So it just works. You could, in theory, play as a wombat or a wallaby. I would like to call it the Spring-Loaded Pnoll, since these two creatures are reported to be really fast runners. You could probably give them an extra bonus to their walking speed, probably give them an unarmed attack that uses bludgeoning damage, something that goes with the flavoring of these two marsupials. It's not too far of a stretch to go with that route. Now, for backgrounds, it recommends going with the Animal Whisperer, Hermit, Merchant, Nomad, or Tinker. Going over the lore of the Pnoll, I would like to recommend a few other backgrounds. The Animal Wrangler, the Charlatan, Cook, Curandero, Farmhand, Farmsteader, Folklore Enthusiast, Gold Hand Arms Dealer, Gunsmith, Junk Collector, Junker, Knack for Contraptions, Mechanic, Miner, Night Watch, Nocturnal Navigator, Once Bitten, Outskirt Dweller, Returned, Revenant, Scavenger, Seer of the Dead, Tall Tale, and Wildwood Local. Some of the Pnoll's lore kind of made me feel like a Pnoll could make for a good spiritualist of some kind. Sort of like, what was that one ghost hunting show? Oh, yes, that's right, Deep South Paranormal, where all these rednecky folk were hunting ghosts, using their own flavoring of ghost hunting. Sort of like how the Thaumaturge class works. And I think that is actually in the good addition to the recommended classes that are given to us in this document. Logan actually recommends using the Alchemist, Druid, Ranger, and Rogue. But Thaumaturge just feels right for the Pnoll. Now, another thing that's interesting about the Pnoll, I did mention that Pnolls prefer to have names that are short, sweet, right to the point. And that philosophy goes not only into naming conventions. If a task is complicated and requires a lot of paperwork in order to get done, they're just going to give up and leave. If it is too difficult, there are too many steps involved, they don't want anything to do with it. They just want to get in, grab the stuff, and get out. No complicated plan, in and out. So, it does encourage a non-cooperative sort of play, and I would recommend that you don't lean too much into that aspect of the Pnoll, but it's just something to mention. Maybe instead of just straight out giving up, they go, I have a better idea. How about we do this? And they just bring out a stick of dynamite and chuck it at the wall. Something like that. I think that would be a lot more entertaining than just throwing their hands up and walking right out the door. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the lore of the Pnoll and see what type of characters we can create. What subclass options best fit the Pnoll? Starting things off with the Alchemist. We're going to be creating some Molotov cocktails and some moonshine, using the research fields of the Bomber and Toxicologist. For the Animist, this one was definitely interesting. I wanted to go with the practices of Medium, Seer, and Shaman, but the Apparitions is where things got a little more complicated. I did find 3 that did seem to fit with the Pnoll's style. The Custodian of Groves and Gardens, Reveler in Lost Glee, and Stalker in Darkened Boughs. Moving on to the Barbarian. This one was definitely going to be one of the more common types of classes used for a Pnoll. Not the most common, as I think that's going to go with one of the other classes that we'll be seeing later on. But I see more of an Alchemist being used. Anyway, for the Barbarian's instincts, I highly recommend going for the Animal, using bear, frog, snake, or crocodile to lean more into those rednecky wilderness bayou hillbilly archetypes that the Pnoll seem to embody. Especially if you were to go for something like a Tasmanian devil. Speaking of, one that I did not list on here was the instinct of the elemental. I would only recommend doing that if you're leaning for more of a copy of Taz from Looney Tunes, as he is a Tasmanian devil, but he seems to be embodying the element of air. Anyway, that's just something I thought of while I was doing this class. Other instincts that I think would work for a Pnoll are Decay and, of course, Spirit. Moving over to the Bard, go ahead and string up your banjo and play us a tune. For the Muses, obviously Zoophonia is going to be the first one anyone's going to think of when they think of the Pnoll, but I would like to think that the Polymath would be the more common muse for a Pnoll to take up. Sure, they're another animal folk like any other animal folk out there, but the Polymath really just fits with the Pnoll's theming. Moving on to the Cleric. This one's a little weird, as Pnolls have a weird relationship with religion. To quote the document, Pnolls as a people have good intentions, but little comprehension of laws that don't protect people from harm. This means most of them are neutral good or chaotic good. When it comes to worship, they choose what they like of a god's tenets and reject the rest. For instance, even a good Pnoll might appreciate that Lamashtu is a mother who supports the downtrodden while disliking her exhortation of corruption, essentially taking one lesson away while ignoring the rest of the deity's edicts. Most people more invested in organized religion find this incomprehensible, and they don't believe the Pnoll is worshipping the deity at all. This reminds me of a lot of the thought process in religious groups nowadays, especially a lot of different churches in the Christian belief, and why a lot of people don't really like those religious groups. So, that was a little bit of a call out there. It felt a little too close to home. But it does show that while a Pnoll could, in fact, be a religious individual, they only take what they want to heart. But that doesn't mean that there are deities that they wouldn't be more committed towards. And I would like to think that Caden, the accidental god, would be more to a Pnoll's liking than the Mashtu would. Even though it is mentioned, I think that Caden is a better fit. Are there any other deities they might enjoy? I have no idea. That is just the first of the deities that had come to mind. Moving on to the Druid. For your Druidic orders, I would recommend the Animal, Cultivation, Spore, Storm, and Untamed. For Gunslinger, this is going to lean more towards the crazy old Prospector. If you find any gold, it's mine! I think that stereotype kind of fits the Pnoll. So for that stereotype, I would say that the way of the Drifter or Pistolaro would fit a Pnoll. Now, you don't have to go with a crazy old Prospector to be a gunslinging Pnoll. Plenty of Bayou Hill-Billies will use a shotgun. So the Drifter might work. Next is the Investigator. I don't see too many Investigator Pnolls happening, but if there are any, the methodology of alchemical sciences wouldn't be too far off. Going for Magus next. For your hybrid studies, I would recommend the Resurgent Maelstrom and the Twisting Tree. Though I can definitely see Twisting Tree being the more common of the Pnoll Magus. Going over to Oracle next. For your mysteries, I would recommend Blight, Bones, Life, and Tempest. Next is your Rogue. Probably the second most common class that a Pnoll will take. For your roguish rackets, I would recommend the Ruffian and the Thief. Next is the Sorcerer. For your Sorcerer bloodlines, I would recommend the Hag, the Psychopomp, and the Undead. Just imagine it. A Pnoll who died and was immediately brought back by a Psychopomp. Or maybe Pharasma herself. And they could just blow it off as, oh, you know us Pnolls, we're possums after all, just playing dead. While secretly, they are now an agent of good, trying to destroy the undead. I like it as a character concept. I'm not sure if anybody else would go with that, but it's just a funny coincidence. Moving on to Swashbuckler. For your styles, I would recommend Braggart, Rascal, and Wit. Next is the Witch. For your patron themes is going to be the Devourer of Decay, Mosquito Witch, Paradox of Opposites, and Wilding Steward. Wilding Steward, of course, being the more common one. Paradox of Opposites just kind of goes hand in hand with the possum's whole theming, while Devourer of Decay leans more into the Tasmanian Devil, while Mosquito Witch just is kind of there because it's a coincidence. Now, I don't have Wizard as a listed class because, once again, that involves reading. That is a long process that the Pnoll do not have any time for, so I did not put the Wizard class down. Does that mean that there aren't any Pnoll out there that would take up the wizard class? There could be one or two. But I didn't see any point in making a category of Pnoll wizards, since normally they would not go for it. But that's just what I think. What are your thoughts on the Pnoll, and what type of character would you create? Let me know in the comment section down below. And until next time, this has been Drehan, and I am offline.